What do you do when the company you built with your own hands starts to feel like a stranger to you? Darren Price leaned back in the cracked leather of his office chair, a cold cup of coffee untouched on his desk. The windows behind him looked out over the city skyline, but he wasn't seeing any of it. His attention was on the stack of ride logs, customer service complaints, and driver feedback reports spread across his desk like a crime scene. He'd bought the ride-hailing company 7 years ago when it was just a mess of outdated sedans and inconsistent service. 14 hubs now ran across the state, and business was booming, at least on paper. But something felt off. Last month, Darren had noticed a trend: driver turnover was high in 3 districts. Customer ratings were dipping. And then came the kicker. A customer had posted a video of a driver apologizing profusely for a car that smelled like stale fries and a busted air conditioner. That video went viral. Darren had tried to get answers from managers. The district manager, a guy named Reggie, blamed lazy drivers and high gas prices. But it didn't add up. Darren didn't believe in running a company from behind spreadsheets. He needed to see it for himself. So he did what he hadn't done in 5 years. He shaved the beard, dyed the edges of his hair gray, and put on a pair of thick-rimmed glasses. His name, for the next week, would be Greg. He signed up as a regular customer through the app and requested a ride from one of his own hubs, District 7, downtown, where complaints were highest. He hadn't met most of the drivers personally. With 14 hubs and over 200 drivers, it was impossible to know everyone. And with his new look, clean-shaven, fake wrinkle lines, and a borrowed southern drawl, no one would guess he was the CEO. His phone buzzed, ride accepted, driver Lionel. Darren stepped outside his rented apartment, a hoodie zipped up over his shirt. A silver Toyota pulled up, headlights flicking twice. He opened the door and slid into the backseat. "Greg," the driver asked, checking the app. "That's me," Darren replied, glancing up. The driver was in his mid-30s, skin the color of roasted coffee beans, shoulders a little hunched, but his eyes were sharp. Tired but focused. "Seatbelt, please," Lionel said kindly, pulling back into traffic. "Where we headed?" "Just across town. Midtown Library," Darren answered. He had no real reason to go there, it just gave him enough time to chat. The ride started in silence except for the soft hum of the engine. Darren noticed the car was spotless. No weird smells, not a crumb on the seat. "You keep this car cleaner than my kitchen," Darren said, half joking. Lionel chuckled. "Yes, well, I drive 12 hours a day. I figure if I gotta live in here, might as well keep it livable." 12 hours, Darren raised an eyebrow. "You don't get tired." "Every day," Lionel said. "But I got a daughter. She's 10, smart as a whip, wants to be an architect. That tuition's not gonna pay itself." Darren watched him in the mirror. There was something steady in the way he talked. Honest. "You always wanted to drive?" Darren asked. Lionel hesitated for half a block. "Nah, I used to work construction, got laid off 2 years ago, couldn't find anything steady. This was what I could get fast." "You good at it," Darren said. Lionel smiled, eyes still on the road. "Thanks, I try to treat people the way I want my mama treated." They hit a red light. A homeless man tapped on the window. Darren reached for his wallet, but Lionel was faster. He cracked the window and handed over a wrapped sandwich and bottle of water from a cooler in the front seat. Darren blinked. "You carry food around?" Lionel nodded. "Just in case. Ain't much, but it's something." The light turned green. They rolled on. Darren cleared his throat. "You ever think of doing something else?" Lionel laughed. "Every day. I want to open a community garage, teach kids how to fix cars, give them something to do besides get in trouble, but dreams don't pay bills." Darren didn't speak for the next few minutes. He just watched the city roll by, thinking. They reached the library. Lionel turned in the seat. "That'll do it, Greg. Thanks for the ride." Darren pulled out a 20 and handed it over. "Keep the change." Lionel waved it off. "Nah, man, app already charged you, we good." Darren stepped out slowly, still watching Lionel pull away. He didn't look like a tired man. He looked like someone carrying the weight of 5 people on his back and still moving forward. Darren knew what he had to do. This wasn't about spreadsheets anymore. He opened the app and booked another ride for tomorrow, same district, different driver. The next 5 days, Darren rode with over a dozen drivers. Some were lazy, some were clearly just passing time, but a few like Lionel were gold. Hardworking, careful, kind, and none of them had ever seen the CEO in person. Back at the District 7 hub, things weren't so clean. Darren walked in on the 6th day, dressed in a cheap polo and khakis, a fake employee badge clipped to his belt. He was Greg from corporate, shadowing for efficiency reports. The manager on site, a guy named Vic, didn't look thrilled. "You here to make us look bad?" Vic grunted. "Just observing," Darren said coolly. "Don't mind me." But he did mind, because what Darren saw over the next few hours made his stomach twist. Drivers waiting around for assignments while Vic barked orders from his office. No one greeted him when he walked in. Coffee machine broken, bathrooms disgusting. The dispatch computer had a crack down the screen, and more than once he overheard Vic bad-mouthing drivers. "These guys are a bunch of crybabies," Vic said to another employee. "Always whining about tips or hours. If they don't like it, they can go flip burgers." Darren clenched his jaw but said nothing. Not yet. That afternoon, he saw Lionel walk in, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You again," Lionel said, surprised. "Small world." Darren smiled. "Mind if I walk with you?" Lionel shrugged. "Sure." They sat at a beat-up table in the back as Lionel ate a sandwich. "You ever talk to management about your garage idea?" Darren asked. Lionel snorted. "Vic," he laughed in my face, "told me to focus on not being late. I've never been late once." Darren nodded slowly. That night, he sat in his rented room, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, the mask comes off. Darren arrived at the District 7 hub early the next morning, still dressed as Greg from corporate. The sun hadn't fully risen, and most of the lot was empty, save for a few sedans parked in uneven rows and a single driver sipping coffee from a paper cup near the back wall. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional rumble of an engine warming up. He slipped inside through the side entrance. The air inside the hub was stale, something between old takeout and damp carpet. A flickering bulb near the back hallway buzzed softly. 2 folding tables had been pushed together to form a makeshift workspace where dispatchers worked silently, barely glancing up as he walked in. Vic was already there, leaning against the front desk, arms crossed over his chest. His shirt looked like he'd slept in it. "You're early," Vic said, not bothering to hide his irritation. "I wanted to see the pre-shift prep," Darren replied. "Get a sense of how things operate when things are just getting started." Vic let out a short breath. Nothing to see. Drivers grab their assignments, maybe check the maintenance board, and head out. Efficiency doesn't need a warm-up. A young woman in a navy hoodie with the company logo entered behind them. Her steps hurried. "Morning, Mr. V," she said. "Late again, Tasha," Vic barked. "Third time this week. Don't make me write it up." "I had to drop my kid off at daycare," she muttered, her face tight as she moved toward the driver check-in. Darren watched her go, then turned to Vic. "She one of your regulars?" Vic shrugged. "Shows up most days, can't keep her schedule straight. Personal problems always bleeding into the job." Darren didn't respond. Instead, he moved toward the board where assignments were posted. A few drivers had already checked in, the rest of the list still blank. He noticed something. The routes that started later in the morning were double stacked. Same few names, same long stretches. It looked like the system was assigning longer shifts to the same people, day in and day out. Is there a reason the same drivers are always on the longest routes? Darren asked. Vic barely looked up. The new guys can't handle high-volume windows. Give the heavy loads to the ones who don't complain. Doesn't that burn them out? Vic turned, arms still folded. You ever run a place like this? You start worrying about burnout, you'll have no one left to cover the busy times. I don't make the rules. I fill the schedule. Darren nodded once, then walked toward the back. He found Lionel prepping his car near the loading area, wiping down the windows. Didn't expect to see you again, Lionel said, tossing the rag over his shoulder. I'm shadowing for another day, Darren said, trying to understand the operation from the ground level. Lionel leaned against the driver's side door, arms crossed. You won't find much back here besides tired engines and people running on fumes. You ever ask for a day off? Lionel chuckled drily. Last time I asked for a long weekend, Vic gave me 3 extra shifts, said he thought I needed more structure. Darren raised an eyebrow. You serious? Man's got his own idea of motivation, Lionel said. Look, I don't complain. I got bills like everyone else. But some of these kids, they're holding on by threads. A small hatchback pulled up beside them, dented on the passenger side. A kid no older than 19 stepped out, hoodie over his head, shoes half untied. He looked like he hadn't slept. Yo, Lionel, the kid said, voice low. Vic said I gotta run the East Loop again. That's 3 days in a row. Lionel looked at Darren before responding. You talked to him about it. Man, he don't listen. I asked him to swap me to a short route so could make my community college class this afternoon. He said I should choose if I want a diploma or a paycheck. Darren's jaw tightened. What's your name? Reuben, the kid said, glancing cautiously at Lionel. Reuben's one of the few drivers actually trying to better himself, Lionel said. He's been pulling 12-hour shifts and still trying to make it to night classes. Reuben gave a small, tired nod, then walked toward the check-in desk. Darren stayed quiet, but inside, something shifted. This wasn't just overscheduling, it was gatekeeping opportunity. Later that morning, Darren returned to the main office, where Vic was on a call. His voice carried through the room, loud and dismissive. I don't care how many stars the guy has. If he wants weekends off, he can find a job with training wheels. Darren waited until the call ended. Vic, can I see the maintenance logs? Vic gave him a look like he'd asked for a kidney. Why? Just part of the shadowing. Want to see how we're handling wear and tear. Vic muttered something under his breath, then opened a drawer and tossed over a binder. Darren flipped through it. Pages were incomplete. Several entries had no follow-ups. One vehicle had been flagged for brake issues 2 weeks ago with no resolution listed. You follow up on these. If it's serious, sure, Vic said. But I don't baby every rattle and squeak. Cars break. That's what insurance is for. Darren closed the binder. Who's responsible for deciding when a car comes off the road? Me, Vic said. I know these vehicles better than any clipboard jockey. Darren didn't reply. He left the binder on the desk and stepped outside. A few drivers were gathered near the vending machine, including Tasha. Mind if I join you? He asked. Tasha looked up, eyes red at the corners. Sure, what's your role again? Corporate observer, he said, just seeing how things run. One of the other drivers, a middle-aged man with a limp, leaned forward. You want to know how things run? We're short cars, short brakes, and short tempers. Tasha nodded. My kid got sick 2 weeks ago. I asked to switch my shift and Vic told me to find someone to babysit my priorities. Ended up driving while she had a fever. Couldn't risk losing the hours. Another driver chimed in. We used to have weekly check-ins. Someone from HQ would call, ask about conditions. That stopped last year. Now it's just Vic. Darren felt the weight of it. Not one complaint, but dozens, layered over each other like sediment. The foundation of the hub was cracking, and no one at the top had been listening. He returned to the lot and waited until late afternoon. When Lionel pulled in from his last run, Darren approached. You got a minute? He asked. Lionel looked exhausted, skin glistening with sweat, but he nodded. Let's say you had control of this hub for a week. What would you change? Lionel didn't answer right away. He sat on the edge of the bumper and pulled off his cap. First, I'd give people a voice. Set up a weekly forum, let drivers talk to someone who actually listens. Second, I'd rotate the routes. Spread the load. Give people a shot to breathe. And third, he paused, glancing toward the office windows, I'd find someone who actually cares to run the place. Not someone who thinks we're all replaceable. Darren looked down at the ground. You think Vic's doing damage? Lionel's voice dropped. I think people are quitting without giving notice because they'd rather deal with uncertainty than his attitude. That should tell you enough. The weight of it settled on Darren's shoulders. He had spent too long trusting the structure to police itself. Now he saw it clear and raw. The numbers hadn't lied. They just hadn't told the full story. Lionel stood and stretched. You're doing this for a report, right? Make sure it gets where it needs to go. Darren nodded once. He watched Lionel drive off, the taillights disappearing into the golden haze of early evening. Tomorrow, the report would be delivered in person, and not by Greg. Darren walked into the District 7 hub just before noon, no disguise, no fake name, no badge clipped to his belt. His presence alone stopped a conversation near the coffee machine. One of the dispatchers muttered something under his breath and hurried down the hall. Vic was sitting at his usual post near the front desk, flipping through a clipboard. He glanced up, then did a double take. His fingers froze mid-page. Darren didn't wait for him to speak. Get everyone off the floor who isn't out on a route, he said. Drivers, dispatchers, maintenance, 10 minutes. I want them in the back room. Vic rose slowly. You can't just walk in here. I can, and I did. Darren's tone was calm but final. Do it. Vic hesitated for a second longer, then moved reluctantly toward the hallway, calling out names with forced urgency. Darren stepped into the back meeting space. The air was heavy with heat and dust, the overhead lights humming faintly above a row of mismatched chairs. He stood at the front of the room, arms folded, watching as Tasha, Ruben, Lionel, and a dozen others filtered in. A few more came in from the garage, wiping their hands on their pants, eyebrows raised in confusion. No one spoke for a moment. They just looked at him, trying to make sense of why the man from the Apps About Us page was standing in front of them. Darren cleared his throat. My name is Darren Price. I'm the founder and CEO of this company. For the past week, I've been riding with drivers in this district under a different name. I've sat in your cars. I've listened to your stories. And I came here today because I need to say something to you directly. The room was silent, 20 pairs of eyes locked on him. I built this company on the idea that good service starts with good people, that if we treated our drivers with respect and gave them the tools to succeed, they'd take care of everything else. Somewhere along the way, I stopped checking if that was still true. That's my failure. A few heads nodded slightly. A dispatcher leaned back in his chair, watching him closely. I heard things this week I should have heard a year ago, about how you're scheduled without consideration, about how asking for a sick day turns into a punishment, about working 12, 13-hour shifts without anyone checking to see if you're okay. That ends now. Vic walked in at the back, arms crossed tightly. Darren didn't acknowledge him. I won't promise miracles. Can't instantly fix staffing shortages or make every vehicle perfect overnight. But I can make sure no one's ignored, dismissed, or disrespected by their own leadership. He turns toward Vic. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending a full review. You'll be escorted off-site after this meeting. You'll not return until we've completed an internal audit. Vic's eyes widened. You're making a mistake. No, Darren said. I made the mistake of trusting you to lead people, not just manage numbers. He turned back to the room. I've brought in an interim operations lead, someone from another district who's run a clean, high-performing hub for years. Her name's Jeanette Webb. She'll be here this afternoon. She doesn't take shortcuts, and she listens. A driver near the back raised his hand slightly, hesitant. Darren nodded at him. What happens to the schedule? The man asked. We're still short bodies. You take Vic out, we lose the only one who knew the system. We're not pretending this is easy, Darren said. We're going to adjust the load. I've authorized overtime bonuses for the next 2 weeks to ease the pressure. We'll be staggering the longest routes and rotating shifts more evenly. If you want more hours, you'll get them. If you need fewer, you'll be heard. A young woman near the front leaned forward. What about complaints? We've filled out forms for months. Nothing changed. Starting today, there's a direct reporting line to HQ for this district. Anonymous if you want. Anything that's ignored will be tracked. If your vehicle's unsafe, it'll come off the road. If your hours are mismanaged, we'll correct it. He looked around the room again. I didn't come here to clean up a headline. I came because you've been holding this place together without support. That ends today. You'll have backup now. You'll have someone watching who actually gives a damn. He stepped back slightly. I'll be around this week. No suits, no PR team, just me. If you have something to say, I'm listening. He nodded once and turned to leave, but a voice stopped him. Wait. It was Lionel. He stood up from his chair, eyes steady. Why now? He asked. Why not 6 months ago? Darren paused at the door. Because I stopped showing up, he said. I let a title get between me and the truth. You did more for this company this week than I did in the last year. You reminded me what leadership's supposed to be. Lionel gave a small nod. Not approval, just acknowledgement. Darren stepped out into the hallway. Behind him, he heard quiet murmurs beginning to rise, not panicked or angry, just cautious, like people testing the ground beneath their feet. By mid-afternoon, Jeanette had arrived. A former military logistics coordinator turned operations lead, she moved through the hub with calm authority. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't bark orders. She asked questions, took notes, pulled people aside and listened, really listened. Darren watched from the corner of the garage as she spoke with Ruben near the intake board. The kid looked unsure at first, but within minutes, his shoulders had relaxed, and he was pointing toward a sheet of route assignments with quiet confidence. Later, Darren found Lionel sitting on the rear bumper of his sedan, engine off, lunch unopened in his lap. You have a few minutes, Darren asked. Lionel glanced up, sure. Darren leaned against the wall. I meant what I said in there. You've got leadership instincts. You ever thought about stepping into a role beyond driving? Lionel gave a slow shrug. I've thought about it, yeah, but thinking and doing are two different things. We've got a mentorship program on pause. I'm reactivating it. Want you in it. Lionel looked at him unsure. What's the catch? No catch. You spend the next 6 weeks shadowing operations, learning dispatch systems, maintenance logs, scheduling. At the end, you decide if you want to stay on the road or move into management. Lionel looked away for a moment, then back. I got a daughter. I still need the hours. We'll cover full pay during the mentorship. And if you decide to take the position, we'll offer a benefits package that includes education assistance for you and your daughter. Lionel's jaw tightened slightly. He looked down at the food in his lap, then back up. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Darren pushed off the wall and started to walk away. Hey, Lionel called after him. Darren turned. If this is just a show, people are gonna know. I know, Darren said. That's why it's not. He walked back toward the main building, the sound of tools clinking in the garage faint behind him. The air felt different, not lighter but clearer. Like a storm had passed and left behind a sky you could finally see through. He didn't know how long it would take to fix everything, probably months, maybe longer. But at least now, he was looking in the right direction. The following Monday, the District 7 hub opened under a new rhythm, not smoother, not easier, but different. The weight of routine hadn't lifted, but something had cracked beneath it. Jeanette's arrival had cooled the tension in the air, not because she made promises, but because she didn't waste time pretending things were fine. The garage lights buzzed on at 6:30 sharp. Jeanette stood near the check-in table with a clipboard and a quiet focus. She didn't direct from a distance, she asked drivers about their routes, jotted down their answers, and moved on. No small talk, no overreaching, just attention. Darren returned mid-morning, dressed in an old company jacket he hadn't worn in years, the navy fabric faded at the collar. He wasn't here to inspect or oversee. He carried no folder, no agenda. Instead, he pulled up a folding chair beside the break room vending machine and started talking to people one by one. Has the rotation changed yet? He asked a driver named Elias, who was leaning against the wall with a thermos in hand. Yeah, Elias said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Jeanette added 2 more early shifts to the pool, gave me a mid-route today. First time in 3 weeks I'm not closing. You okay with that? I'm tired either way, Elias said, but spreading it out makes it feel less rigged. That's something. Darren nodded. If you had a fix-it list, what's top? Elias shrugged. We need a second dispatch screen. The current one's lagging bad, and maybe a lock for the tool shed stuff keeps disappearing. Darren stood. I'll take care of both. Anything else? Elias hesitated, then shook his head. That's enough for today. Outside, Reuben was doing a pre-check on a sedan with a busted mirror. He didn't look up until Darren crouched beside him. Got time for a question? Darren asked. Reuben nodded, still tightening a bolt. You still trying to make those afternoon classes? For now, Reuben said. Jeanette pulled me off the East Loop, gave me a compressed shift starting at 5:30. I'll make it to class if traffic doesn't kill me. Darren leaned back against the bumper. You planning to stay in school full-time? Trying to, Reuben glanced up. But if I don't get more stable hours, I'll have to drop 1 class next semester. We're setting up a support fund. Emergency tuition coverage for employees in school. It's not public yet, but you qualify. Jeanette will walk you through the application. Reuben blinked. Is this a loan? No, it's a bridge. Just don't waste it. Reuben looked away, jaw shifting slightly, then nodded once. Later that afternoon, Darren sat beside Jeanette in the front office, reviewing the updated scheduling logs she'd started compiling. The numbers were still tight coverage gaps between the lunch and evening shifts, and several vehicles overdue for rotation. But the routes were more balanced than before, and no one had called out in 3 days. Jeanette tapped the screen beside her. This group's still overloaded. I've got 6 drivers pulling doubles by choice, but that's not sustainable. Can we hire? Not yet, she said. But I've got 2 drivers from District 4 coming in part-time next week to float some hours. One of them used to train new hires. If we can keep morale steady, We'll be able to onboard new people without losing them in 3 weeks. Darren folded his arms. What are you seeing from the staff? Most of them are waiting for the other shoe to drop, Jeanette said. You make changes this fast, they assume it won't last. Best thing you can do is stop talking and start showing up. Sound advice. Jeanette gave a half smile and turned back to her screen. At 4:30, Darren stepped outside to find Lionel in the loading zone, leaning over the hood of his car with a wrench in hand. The air smelled faintly of oil and warm asphalt. You always fix your own ride, Darren asked. No one else is going to, Lionel said, tightening a bolt. This one's on its last legs, but I can squeeze another 6 months out of it. You still thinking about that garage? I never stopped. Darren walked around the hood and stood across from him. I meant what I said about mentorship. We'll stagger the hours so you're not off the road completely, but you'll be in the operations office 3 mornings a week. Jeanette will guide. You learn dispatch, maintenance logs, scheduling software. After 6 weeks, you either step into an assistant ops role or go back to the road full-time. Your call. Lionel didn't answer right away. He just looked down at the wrench in his hand. If I do this, I'm not leaving the drivers behind. I wouldn't want you to. Lionel set the wrench aside. I'll start Monday. As the sun dipped behind the edge of the lot, Darren walked back toward the office, passing the break room where Tasha sat with a steaming cup of tea, her phone on speaker as her daughter's voice filtered through. Behind her, a clean whiteboard had been mounted. Jeanette's doing with a weekly schedule, route openings, and a simple sign that read, "Speak up. We're listening." Inside, the maintenance closet had been reorganized. A new lock had been installed and a spreadsheet taped to the door. Elias's name was on it, signed in blue ink. Darren returned to his chair near the vending machine and sat quietly, watching as people moved through their routines with slightly less weight in their posture. The problems weren't gone. The shortage was real. Vehicles still needed parts they couldn't get fast enough, and the backlog of neglected maintenance would take weeks to clear. But no one was walking out mid-shift anymore. No one had raised their voice in 2 days. And no one had asked where the boss was because he was right there, drinking burnt coffee beside them. That night, Darren stood in the garage doorway, arms folded as Lionel pulled out for a late route. The sedan's engine rattled softly, but it ran. Lionel gave a nod through the window as he passed, eyes forward. Darren nodded back. He didn't need to follow up. He didn't need to ride again in disguise. He knew what kind of people were holding this company together. And now they knew he did too.